I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Bundjalung Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
And so for me, what appeals for us being here and what we've loved over the past couple of months as being set here has been that community.
I don't know, it's kind of like being in a bit of a dream. I mean, the people here are so generous and so kind.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh, Wale. Bar Heather is the new Parisian-inspired, natural wine-focused restaurant and bar on Jonson St in Byron Bay. Today I'm joined by the notorious James Audas and Tom Shear, whose magnificent minds are behind the new venture. Hi James, hi Tom, thanks for joining me.
Hi Shanteh, so nice to be here.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. You guys are not far away from opening. Tell me about if you're ready or are you kind of deep in the weeds and a bit in the shit?
I really think we're in a great spot and we're super excited for the opening today, or the soft opening for us in about 5 hours time. It's been quite a journey, but we're pretty on top of things, and there's fridges full of wine and the food is looking great. So I think we feel like we're in a pretty good position.
As long as the booze is cold, that is always something that can placate people. Make sure you turn the fridges on. I will admit that I have not turned the fridges on a particular opening one time, and that wasn't wonderful, icing down everything last minute. Can we start with some introductions? Just for some poor sod who doesn't know who you guys are, can you give me a bit of a rundown on your background? James, let's start with you.
So Tom and I both worked in hospitality for about 10 years before we started Lo-Fi in 2013. So Lo-Fi is 10 years old at the end of this year, which is really exciting to have sort of made that milestone. Personally, I started in hospitality as soon as I finished school, quickly became a sommelier, and had worked at places like Tetsuya's, which were sort of my formative years working in the wine industry. And from places like Tetsuya's, I've been lucky enough to write wine lists and manage wine programs for restaurants such as Black by Ezard, Silver Eye, LPs, Quality Meats, work with great sommeliers along the way at places like Maryvale, where I worked at Est and Felix, and had over a year or 15 months working at Noma in Copenhagen.
So yeah, I started more in behind the bar, I suppose. I remember being a young 18-year-old in the opening crew of the Monstrous Ivy on George Street, and just being an invisible glassy for a little while, and then just working my way through a few sort of bigger venues like the Beauchamp and the winery on Crown Street. That was I think once Keystone, and somehow ended up in a job interview at the newly refurbished Star Casino, where I didn't really take to the building as a whole, but inside of it were four great restaurants, Black by Ezard, Momofuku, etc. And the person interviewing me was James. We knew each other from friends of friends of just being teens, but not all that close. And he was just a really great mentor to me. Just always pushed me, encouraged me to sit my exams, the quartermaster exams, and we just formed a close bond. And yeah, about 2 years after that, when he got the offer to move over to Denmark, I didn't see much of a reason to stay, so I ended up at Love Tila Divine, working under Matt Swoboda, which was a real joy. Oscillate Wildly, which has since closed, and then joined James again at LP's Quality Meats. And yeah, the focus was always lo-fi in the background. We would sort of be doing deliveries on our lunch breaks, and I remember waking up at 6 or 7 to pack orders and drive the van around town, quickly shower at 3 o'clock, and then essentially start another work day. That was life for, I don't know, James, 5-6 years, something like that. Yeah, and then somewhere along the way could actually pull a wage and work full time on lo-fi, so that was good.
I remember meeting meeting you, particularly James, just towards the end of when you were kind of stepping off the floor and lo-fi was kind of really developing, and it really was instrumental in highlighting some of the kind of more natural and hands-off kind of winemaking, and it's had great success with that. What has prompted kind of Bar Heather opening? Was it an organic progression from Luna Wine Store, which is your wonderful retail store, and having lo-fi? Was it just the next step, or you just decided to risk it all and get back on the floor?
It's a really good question. It is really a natural progression, I think, from Luna, our wine store that we opened in early 2020. So it was a really interesting time to open a retail space. We were lucky to be in a regional area that wasn't as affected by COVID as perhaps other parts of Australia was. And so as such, we were able to build a great rapport with the community, and we feel like the community really deserved an interesting wine shop, and so that's what we were able to form. So one of our great regular customers at the shop is the developer across the road for Bar Heather, and he approached us quite early on and sort of said, "I'd love you guys to do a wine drinking venue," and it took a lot of convincing of Tom to say yes. But I think no regrets. But I think it was something that got us both really excited, and we felt like it was something that hadn't been done perhaps to this extent in Byron. We've got a pretty extensive wine program at Bar Heather, and so it was really exciting to be able to get back on the floor, build a team, and get excited about serving wine again.
I love that, and I think Byron has a bit of a reputation for the kind of demographic that you have up there. So tell me how you go about creating, a wine list for Bar Heather. What do you want Bar Heather to represent in the community?
I think first and foremost, just staying true to ourselves and writing a wine list and just creating an atmosphere more broadly that we appreciate and we enjoy, and we kind of hope by virtue of that fact that others will enjoy as well. So the kind of list that represents vignerons that farm sustainably and put the health of the soil first, and as the cliche goes, the wine is made in the vineyard. And on the other side of that, with little to no intervention in the cellar, assuming the work in the vineyard is one worth representing. And that informs the list first and foremost. But beyond that, as far as being in Byron Bay, it's a real mix of people. We wanted to create a list that wasn't alienating, was affordable, interesting, constantly rotating, but at the same time create a fair amount of depth in the list as well. So there's a lot of back vintages, there's a lot of cuvées from each producer, and there's a lot of back vintages of each cuvée as well. So you can really take a deep dive into either a region or a producer for that matter, that you like, and just run with it.
I love that when you can get I love seeing lots of different cuvées from same producers, because you really get a feel of a style and what they're trying to achieve, rather than just having that one kind of hand-picked random wine that kind of, if you get on a roll, especially if you're drinking a few bottles, you really see what they're all about. I think that's really smart.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of thought about it the way to write a list to represent the way you almost travel and experience wine in physical space. So, we go to Europe a few times a year for lo-fi, and we jump in a car and we go from, I don't know, say Paris to the Loire Valley. And when you're in the Loire Valley, let's say you spend a week in a particular part of it, you just get immersed in it and all of the totality of what it has to offer. And we just thought it'd be so fun to write a list that it's almost like driving through the Loire. So you've got a sub-region, you've got all the producers that interest us in that sub-region and all of their cuvées, and you can drink your way through it. And that seemed more true to real life than, as you say, sort of like a hand-picked bottle or two. and divided by weight or style rather than geography.
Yeah, that's perfect, and it makes complete sense. I feel like it'd be amiss of me not to ask you a little bit about natural wine today. Tom, what is natural wine according to you, and what then is unnatural wine?
I'll try to thread the needle here as best I can. I'm sure there's something to say that will not offend, but probably give someone to take issue with something. But as far as I'm concerned, natural wine comes together in two spheres. The first sphere, and for me the more interesting one, is in the vineyard. So sustainable philosophy behind the farming, whether that be organic or biodynamic, whether it be certified or not, to the degrees to which someone can do that. But really focusing on soil health and flavor development in the fruit. I love vignerons that will actually choose their picking date based on flavor rather than some sort of analysis. And that just naturally flows on to the cellar, which is the second sphere of not inoculating the wines, not filtering or fining, adding enzymes, acids, etc. And then, whether the wine can handle it, not adding sulfur as well.
I'm glad that you're ready for that. So thank you for that, because I did think if I was to tune into this podcast, I would love to ask these guys this question and not be the one on the other end receiving that question. So I think you've done really well there. Sorry, James, what were you going to say?
I think the no sulfur debate tends to be the really big one within like the definition of natural wine. And I think for Tom and I, we've always been rather agnostic on wanting to have that debate. And rather leave it to the winemakers to make that decision. But from our point of view, whether it be a really small amount of sulfur or not, we sort of are happy to leave it to the winemaker to make that distinction.
Yeah, and we trust you on that because you are the person that's importing and moving wines from place to place. So you're somebody that's going to really see the challenges of that or not. So I think that makes sense. I trust your judgment.
Yeah, I would just add that for me, at the end of the day, it's about flavor. It's about taste. People we can talk all we want about no sulfur and the sort of dogmatism that comes behind it. But if you have a wine that's not a pleasure to drink, then it kind of misses the point for me. So long as the experience is a joyful one, that's primary for me.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that is the bottom line, isn't it? Enjoyment. And as we've got so many options out there for what we put in our bodies, we want it to be joyful. James, I wanted to ask you, how have you seen the natural wine progression in Australia since you've been in the industry?
I remember in the early days being shown some of the first sort of natural wines that were being imported to the country and being quite sort of taken by them back in sort of 2006, 7 and 8. I think from my progression into it was really sort of guided by Richard Hargraves, who was the head sommelier at Momofuku. And I remember we sort of used to catch up for bottles of wine post-service, and he'd always bring the most sort of interesting things, and he was sort of a great guide for me into the industry. And tasting some of the first Australian natural wines out of groups like James, Tom and Anton, and of course being guided by Sam Hughes within that sort of space. So at the time it was very novel, it was very exciting, and I think we've sort of seen it develop as an industry within an industry, and definitely be seen not just sort of as the fad as I think it was labelled for so many years. I think more and more larger wineries are making the decision to farm more sustainably and to really question why they're adding what they're adding in the winery. And I think over the past couple of years, where I've sort of moved a little bit more into the winemaking side of things, it's been really an interesting side of things to pick up and better understand, and definitely helped, I think, both Tom and I in the importing side of things to be a little bit more critical on all aspects. But I think as an industry, it's a really exciting one, and there's so many great young producers coming up all throughout the world in more traditional or less traditional regions. And I think the wines, as we sort of see whenever we go out to sort of most restaurants now, most restaurants within the major cities tend to have at least a small representation of natural wine.
I think also we've seen, wine be a topic of conversation and a choice for, people on a table, and natural wine has really changed that demographic of who is drinking wine. Have you seen, a diverse range of drinkers choosing to drink, natural wine or just wine in general since you've been, importing and dealing with more lo-fi, as we say, wines?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the demographic for us has definitely gotten younger in people that are buying our wines. Although my mum will hate me saying that, because she sort of got back into drinking wine through natural wine and orange wines, which she finds a lot more palatable, and B, a lot easier to wake up after having a couple of glasses, when she used to really sort of struggle with wine. So I think for us, we're definitely seeing that sort of demographic getting a little bit younger and getting people more interested in wine at a younger age, which for us we're particularly enjoying. And I think, whether it be the brightest styles of wines, the generally slightly lower alcohols through a lot more natural wines in the earlier picks and earlier releases, I think we're starting to see a little bit of a change in the demographic of wine drinkers, for sure.
I love that. I mean, the more people drinking great beverages, the better off we are, I think, in the grand scheme of things. I want to talk a little bit about local wines. I know the kitchen is really looking at sourcing local produce. Are you working with many local wines? Anything from the Northern Rivers? Any, wines by the glass that you're working with locally?
Yeah, so I suppose the main local producer known here in the Northern Rivers is Jared from Gilly Wines. He's got a really interesting new vineyard that's been planted in Clunes, which has a slightly windier and perhaps cooler microclimate than what you'd usually associate with just generally the Northern Rivers. But he buys a lot of his fruit from New England, further to the west. And that's been the main one, I suppose, more locally here. But we've got a nice mix as far as the by the glass is concerned of local producers. I mean, this will change sort of week to week, but just having tasted the wines yesterday, we have the Limis wines out of Mount Gambier, and a few other Australians. We've got some South African producers, Austrians. I mean, it's a real mixed bag, but we try to do our best to represent local producers here in Australia that we think, demand the attention, because there's so much great winemaking happening here. So it'd be a real shame to sort of comb right past it.
And I think locally, New South Wales-wise, we've also, the guys from Chateau Acid, so Simon and Charlie, have been really great friends of ours for a while, and they sort of dug into their cellar and found a few of their early releases as well. So it's been great to have a few there, and I think over time we'd love to continue adding and making the New South Wales part of the list stronger, and as well potentially some Southern Queensland wines from the Granite Belt as well.
Perfect. I mean, the beauty of having lots of things change on by the glass is that you can keep yourself interested and your regular drinkers by changing it and giving lots of different producers their time in the spotlight, which is always fun. You both worked in pretty bustling cities. What do you love about living and working on the far north coast?
Well, I should say from the outset, we're not actually going to live here long term. James has a very much a functioning farm, vineyard, and family and children back in Gippsland, in West Gippsland. I myself am based in Sydney, and that makes most sense for us as far as our other projects like Lo-Fi and Dust Juice and other things. But being here for the past few months, it's been, I don't know, it's kind of like being in a bit of a dream. I mean, it's so incredibly beautiful. Whether you're just going for a walk or having a surf or something, it's outrageously gorgeous. The people here are so generous and so kind. It's obviously pretty transient with the tourism side as well, but it's just a really interesting place to live. Everything's a little bit more down tempo and kind of laid back, which I'm sure suits most people. We're both pretty fidgety ourselves, so we kind of I don't know. It's a mixed bag, but it's incredibly positive. Everyone's just so lovely here. Yeah,
That's nice to hear. James, what's the big standout for you? I mean, you've got, I like that you said fidgety because you all have so much going on in your lives. I find it amazing that you can keep up with everything that's happening. But James, what do you find is different from Gippsland and the other cities that you've lived in up there?
Again, I think there are a lot of similarities for me with the community here as the community is into West Gippsland. I think at heart, it's a regional town, and I think for me, the decision to move out of I guess Sydney and Melbourne and things in 2017 was sort of drawn from wanting to be a little bit more grounded, to be able to spend my free time essentially in what felt a little bit more like the wild, and so my lovely wife Jess and I, we bought a farm in 2017 in the hills of West Gippsland, and have really tried to integrate ourselves into what it at heart is a farming community. I think the decision for us to open the shop up here in Byron and now Bar Heather is really focused around that as well. Byron's a really generous community which has I guess it's deep roots within the ideas of organics, and I think a lot of people understand that. And so for me, what appeals for us being here and what we've loved over the past couple of months as being set here has been that community. Everyone has been so generous, from the other hospitality businesses who were just like, if you need anything, we'll give you what milk we have for the night if you need it, and all of those sorts of things. That it's not about competition, it's about building a destination, and I think that's what so many of the businesses here have done. There's no one trying to compete with each other. Everyone is just trying to make it so that if you come on holidays to Byron Bay, you can go and visit all of us, rather than that really fiercely competitive scene that is Sydney and Melbourne hospitality.
Yeah, I can really resonate with a lot of the sentiment in that, and I think the cities are amazing, and they'll always be a part, especially if you're in hospo, a part of who you are and what you love. But there's something to be said about being a bit more regional and slowing down. And like you said, the hospitality takes on a different vibe. So if I was to say walk into Bar Heather and experience it for the first time, what would you want people to take away? What are they going to be listening to? What are they going to be snacking on? What is the overall vibe of Bar Heather?
Oh, it's actually a hard one to explain for me personally, because it's become a bit of a Venn diagram of a lot of places that we've fallen in love with over the years, whether it be venues here in Australia or traveling overseas. We loved the sort of grandiose entrance of the curtains that would often be hung in the wine bars in Paris, usually there to block a draft, but it was a really nice touch. We loved the warmth and hospitality of 10 William Street and that beautiful corner window seat. We love that big brass footrest that wraps around the bar at Embla in Melbourne. We love the banquettes and the coziness of Chateaubriand in Paris. The intimacy that you see in Septime in Paris. All these sorts of places that essentially we tried to. It was like a greatest hits, whether it be a font or a chair or a sound or even a sequence of service that we tried to pull together. As far as music is concerned, we got a lot of friends to help us, in particular Charlie from Chateau Acid, who's also a DJ as Charlie Chucks, but put together a really lovely, what would you call it? Forgotten disco, I suppose, is the best way to put it. The B-sides of the disco tracks that we love. We want it to be dark and loud and fun and welcoming. There's no formalities. It's very much a take your time. Let's talk about it. Let's put something in your glass before even the food menu comes down. So it's very much focused around what are we drinking first and foremost, just to have a bit of fun.
Hallelujah. That says all the kind of things I want to hear. Put something in my glass and let's just chill out for 5 seconds before we make a plan. I really like that. And it sounds like you have really thought about everything down to the minute detail, which, is so important because, like you said, it can be just small little considerations. I love being able to sit up at a bar somewhere and have a coat or a bag hook. Like, it's the smallest things for me, but it gets that bloody stupid thing that I'm carrying around with God knows what in it out of my way so that I can just chill out, So I really love that you've thought about all the small details. I think that's really considerate, and it's definitely going to have you set for success. Gentlemen, I always ask my guests, if you could only drink 3 beverages for the rest of your life, what would they be and why? I know it's an unfair question, but James, why don't you set the scene for us?
All right, 3 beverages. My first one's got to be the Highway Yuzu that Matt from Black Market Sake brings in. That for me is that's my first big thing, and I don't think Jess and I would survive summers without that.
100%, it's crack. It's so good.
I'm not a particularly big beer drinker, but I think if I was, I think there would probably be the thought of a beer in there, and so the table beer from Topher at Wildflower is one of my favourites, and we've actually got that on keg at By Heather, which is really exciting. And then there's got to be wine in there, of course. I personally love champagne. I probably can't afford to drink it as much as I would like to, but one of the producers that we rekindled on our lo-fi portfolio, Amory Beaufort, he's got a really special place in my heart, and his new solo project of champagnes based out of his little vineyard at the back of Palissy in the southern part of Champagne is superb. So that'd probably be my champagne of choice to drink at the moment. So they'd be my 3 desert island drinks, I think.
Oh, nothing but class from you. Yeah, no pressure, Tom.
Jesus, that was so well balanced. How do you do it? Blimey. Well, I'm just going to sound like an idiot after this. I have a very honed-in obsession with one particular producer, Valette from the Macon, who, in my opinion, makes some of the best and perhaps most undervalued Chardonnays in the world. I'm incredibly biased because of just how much I love those wines, how expressive they are, and how beautifully sort of intertwined the acidity is with that sort of oxidative fruit. I thank Andrew Gard all the time for bringing those wines in, and I hope no one notices how great they are so they don't become as rare as what I think they deserve to be, although they are quite rare. So that's for me on the wine front. This is going to sound stupid, but if you're really thirsty and maybe hungover, Blue Powerade, whatever flavor blue is the best.
It's so good.
Yeah. I don't know what blue represents on the flavor spectrum, but I dig it.
Yep.
So that would be on the Powerade front. And then, just really good shit beer. There's a lot I like. If it's in a can, that's great. But just a cold tinny. I'm a big 4X guy. But yeah, that's my go-to.
I have to say, I can agree with those. I'm a blue Powerade person, and I think it's a bit like the rainbow paddle pop. Like, I don't know what flavor that is either, but it's delicious, and who cares? Like, just get it in
Shanteh,
me.
I'm going to ruin your rainbow paddle pop. It's caramel.
Is it though?
Yeah, it's
I thought maybe
caramel.
caramel and maybe malt. Is it just caramel though? 'Cause it's so.
Yeah, it's just caramel. Yeah.
Well, I know what it is. It's definitely better than those rainbow ice creams, the scoop ice creams that were like bubblegum or something flavored. Yuck, it's so gross. And I have to say, Tom, a smashable beer any day of the week. And, I think, Maison Valette, the price point for those wines is sensational. So, I agree with you. Let's hope that they're not in demand and that doesn't go through the roof. So, gentlemen, it's been such a pleasure talking to you guys. And I have to say, super chookers for the opening, because soft openings, even though they're there for a reason and it's your family and friends, they're still pretty nerve wracking. And I can't believe that you're talking to us just before you're going into it. I'm super impressed, and we wish you all the best. Can't wait to get up there. And thank you for making the time, and congratulations in advance.
It's a total pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Loved having you on. Cheers to you guys, and I hope the opening goes well. Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.